Hey guys, tonight we delve into the late night thoughts of an ancient urban maestro, an Indus Valley civilization city planner. Imagine, if you will, the weight on their shoulders, not from a literal sack of standardized bricks, but from the sheer scale of their achievements. We're talking cities that thrived over 4,000 years ago, with populations in the tens of thousands, meticulously laid out while much of the world was still figuring out how not to poke themselves in the eye with a sharp stick. You are that planner, lying on your woven reed mat, the sounds of Harappa or Mohenjo-Daro settling around you. The air is thick with the scent of wood smoke from evening fires, distant cattle, and the slightly damp, earthy smell of a city built near a great river. It's a world away from your own, and let's be honest, given the sanitation standards, however advanced for their time, you probably won't survive this imaginary journey without at least a phantom stomach bug. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's always fascinating to see our global night owl community. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The reed mat beneath you is cool against your skin, a welcome sensation after the day's lingering heat. The soft lamp, its wick burning precious sesame oil, casts flickering shadows that dance with the geometric patterns painted on your walls. Patterns that echo the very city you're struggling to forget, even in sleep. You close your eyes, but the city grid is imprinted on the inside of your eyelids, a vast, unwavering mesh of lines and right angles. It stretches out in your mind's eye, a testament to, well, to what exactly order control, divine inspiration, or just a really determined surveyor with a penchant for straight lines. It's enough to make you wonder if the concept of close enough was even invented yet, or if that was a later, less ambitious civilization's contribution. You shift trying to find a more comfortable position, but the grid holds you in its ghostly grip, demanding your attention, your silent review. Each intersection, each block, each perfectly aligned facade, you supervise them all, from the initial markings in the dust to the final baked brick laid in place. Your mind drifts to those main thoroughfares, the great arteries of your city, typically running straight as a taut rope, oriented, almost as if by sacred decree, along a north-south and east-west axis. This cardinal alignment, a consistent feature across so many of our settlements, wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate choice, reflecting a deep understanding of sun, wind, and perhaps something more cosmic we haven't yet deciphered. You remember the endless days stretching ropes, the arguments over the placement of sighting poles, the sheer physical effort of imposing this vision onto the raw earth. The land doesn't naturally yield to such precision. It resists. It undulates. It throws up unexpected rocks and stubborn ancient tree roots, each one a tiny battle in the larger war for order, and the secondary streets, narrower but no less important. Branching off with mathematical precision, creating those uniform residential blocks that house thousands, each one designed to be wide enough for the passage of ox carts, yet intimate enough for neighbors to exchange news across their doorways. You mentally trace the path of a water vendor, his cart rattling down Avenue 6, then turning sharply into Lane 17, the sound a familiar part of the city's daytime rhythm, now just a faint echo in your memory. But it's not the grand design that gnaws at you tonight. It's the tiny imperfections, the subtle erosions of that perfect plan. You swear old Bimal in Sector 3 thinks the public thoroughfare is an optional extension of his pottery stall, inching his wares out like a very slow, very dusty glacier, a terracotta tide threatening to disrupt the flow of pedestrians. You made a note, dispatch a junior inspector tomorrow. Then there are the children, bless their innocent hearts, who sometimes use the precisely drawn property lines in the dust between houses as tracks for their miniature clay carts, their joyful play inadvertently blurring the perfect edges you so painstakingly delineated. It's a small thing, almost endearing. Yet a part of you, The planner part twitches with a desire to smooth it all back to pristine linearity. It's this constant vigilance, this quiet battle against entropy, that frays the edges of your nerves. The city is a living thing, and living things are rarely as neat as a blueprint. Sometimes you think it would have been easier to just let everyone build where they pleased. A glorious, sprawling mess of mud brick chaos. You've seen villages like that on your travels. Organic tangles of pathways and dwellings, charming in their own way. Perhaps, but then you remember the smell of a truly unplanned settlement after a heavy rain. The way disease can sweep through cramped, unventilated quarters, and your resolve hardens like a thrice-baked brick. This order, this grid, it's not just about aesthetics, it's about health, about efficiency, about creating a space where a large community can thrive. Still, the sheer scale of it, the repetition across hundreds of miles, from the northern highlands to the southern coast. Historians still argue whether this rigid urban template was the decree of a single, powerful authority or the organic result of a deeply ingrained societal preference for order, a shared cultural DNA that simply knew this was the way to build. You don't have the answer. Lying here in the dark, you just know the weight of maintaining it. Day in, day out. A dog barks in the distance, a sharp sound that briefly cuts through the low hum of the sleeping city. You try to focus on your breath, on the coolness of the air entering your nostrils, the warmth as it leaves, but the grid is there, a silent, demanding presence. It's more than just streets and buildings, it's a statement. It's a declaration of intent, of a people who valued structure, predictability, and perhaps a certain kind of fairness, where each plot had its defined space, its access to the common ways. You wonder if anyone else loses sleep over a slightly misaligned drain cover or a boundary wall that's a finger's breadth off true. Probably not. That's your particular blessing. Or curse. The ghostly grip of the grid tightens for a moment. Then, as weariness finally begins to outweigh worry, it starts to soften, its sharp lines blurring ever so slightly at the edges, promising a few hours of uneasy rest before the sun and the city demand your attention once more. The promise of rest, however, is a fickle friend tonight. Just as the sharp lines of the city grid begin to soften in your mind, a new image, fluid and persistent, seeps into your consciousness water. It starts as an imaginary trickle, perhaps the distant rhythmic drip from a slightly loose tap in a neighbor's courtyard, or the remembered gurgle of the main drain after a cleansing flush. Soon, it's a torrent of thoughts, a cascade of concerns about the lifeblood of your city, its water supply, and, just as crucially, its removal. The sheer, intricate dance of providing clean, life-sustaining water to tens of thousands, and then guiding away the sullied remnants is a monumental task, a constant whispering worry that now takes center stage in your pre-sleep theater. That precise order you crave for the streets? It's just as vital, if not more so, for the unseen underground rivers you've engineered. You picture the wells, hundreds of them, scattered throughout the city like punctuation marks in its grand narrative. Public wells at intersections, their brick copings worn smooth by countless hands and ropes, buzzing with life during the day, women exchanging news, children splashing, travelers quenching their thirst. Then there are the private wells, a mark of status and perhaps, but also a practical necessity, sunk deep into the courtyards of the larger homes. Each one a carefully constructed cylinder of precisely shaped, often wedge-like baked bricks, designed to prevent collapse and keep the precious water clean. You can almost feel the damp coolness emanating from them, a stark contrast to the baked heat of the streets. The effort of their creation, the sheer man-hours digging through soil and stone, sometimes down to surprising depth to kiss the water table, is a feat in itself. It's not like you can just ask the river to politely detour into everyone's kitchen. Though, believe me, after the third complaint about a dry well in as many days from some merchant in the upper town, the thought becomes strangely appealing. You make a mental note to check the water table records for Sector 4. Perhaps a new public well is needed there. And then there's the water for bathing, for cleansing. So many homes. You reflect with a measure of pride, boast their own bathing platforms, often made of smooth, waterproofed brick, sloping gently towards a drain. This isn't just about luxury, it's woven into the fabric of your culture. This need for water, for purification. Many Indus Valley homes had private bathing areas and latrines connected to a sophisticated citywide drainage system. A level of sanitation that you instinctively know is remarkable, setting your cities apart. You've heard tales from traders of other lands, places where waste is simply tossed into the street, where water is drawn from the same murky sources used for everything else. A shudder runs through you. Here, even a modest dwelling might have a dedicated space for washing, a small testament to the value placed on cleanliness, or perhaps on ritual. But bringing the water in is only half the equation. Getting it out, once used, is where the real artistry and the real headaches lie. Your mind traces the network of covered drains, an intricate subterranean web mirroring the streets above. Baked brick, meticulously laid with a precise gradient, ensuring the wastewater flows away from homes, towards the larger collector drains, and ultimately, out of the city. Chutes, sometimes ceramic, connect the bathing platforms and latrines directly to these street drains. It's a system designed for efficiency, for hygiene, for minimizing the miasmas and sicknesses that can plague less organized settlements. You remember the endless calculations for slope, the careful oversight of the bricklayers, the little inspection grates and manholes built in for access. Access that is, unfortunately, frequently needed. Some folks, you muse with a sigh, seem to think the drains are a magical portal to another dimension, capable of swallowing anything from last night's leftover lentils and broken pottery to a child's lost toy or even, on one memorable occasion, what looked suspiciously like a ceremonial headdress. The things your crews pull out during routine cleaning could fill a small museum of urban detritus. This is a quirky, less celebrated aspect of your job. Chief investigator of blocked conduits. The maintenance is relentless. A blockage in one section can affect an entire neighborhood, leading to unpleasant overflows and even more unpleasant complaints. You've had to develop robust systems for regular flushing and clearing. Historians still argue whether the elaborate water management systems were primarily designed for hygiene, ritual purification, or a combination of both, reflecting the deep significance of water in their worldview. Lying here, you suspect it's all intertwined. Cleanliness of the body, cleanliness of the spirit, cleanliness of the city, they all flow from the same source. The same respect for water's power. You think of the Great Bath, that monumental structure in the Citadel, its precise brickwork, its bitumen-sealed steps leading down into the massive tank. Was it for kings? For priests? For the entire populace on special occasions? Its purpose remains a grand, silent question. But its connection to water is undeniable, a public declaration of water's central role. The thought of those massive drains, some large enough for a person to walk through, brings a fresh wave of weariness. You try explaining the importance of drain trajectory and the critical nature of mortar consistency to a new apprentice when you're both, shall we say, experiencing the more aromatic consequences of a poorly maintained outfall. It builds character, or at least a very strong stomach and a sudden appreciation for fresh air. You turn over on your mat, pulling the light cotton blanket a little higher. The whispers of water continue in your mind, a constant murmur beneath the surface of the sleeping city, the deep wells drawing life from the earth, the hidden drains carrying away its burdens. It's a cycle as fundamental as the rising and setting of the sun, and your role as planner, as engineer, as glorified plumber to the masses, is to keep that cycle flowing smoothly. Another day, another deluge of decisions awaits. But for now, perhaps sleep will finally come, and the waters of your mind will, at last, run clear and still. But sleep, that elusive quarry, still darts away. As the mental waters of drains and wells begin to recede, your thoughts, like silt settling after a flood, fixate on something more solid, more tangible the bricks, millions upon millions of them, the very bones and sinews of your sprawling city. You can almost feel their familiar, slightly rough texture under your mental fingertips. Smell the faint, earthy scent of fired clay that clings to everything. From the grandest walls of the citadel to the humblest hearth. From the lining of those deep wells you were just obsessing over to the neatly capped drains. Everything is built from these unassuming reddish-brown rectangles. Their uniformity is both a marvel and a monstrous, unceasing demand. A burden of baked earth that rests squarely on your planning shoulders. You find yourself mentally reciting the ratios, the sacred geometry of your civilization's foundational unit. The Indus Valley civilization is famous for its highly standardized, kiln-fired bricks, predominantly in a ratio of 1:4, 1 unit of thickness, 2 of width, 4 of length. This isn't just some aesthetic preference, it's the very key to the structural integrity and rapid, efficient construction that allows your cities to rise. Interlocking patterns, strong bonds, minimal need for complex cutting on site. It's a system born of profound practicality. You sometimes dream in ratios of 1:4. Your grocery lists are probably subconsciously organized that way too. 1 part grain, 2 parts vegetables, 4 parts existential dread about the next brick shipment needing to cover 3 new housing blocks and a reinforcement of the western flood embankment. The sheer, relentless consumption of these standardized units is staggering. Your mind drifts to the outskirts of the city, to the sprawling fields where the clay is dug, a sticky, promising brown. You see the laborers, their bodies gleaming with sweat under the sun, filling mold after mold, each wooden frame designed to produce that exact, perfect shape. The slap and thud of clay hitting wood, the swift scrape of a leveling tool, these are the percussive sounds that underpin your city's growth. Then the rows upon rows of green, unfired bricks, laid out to dry in the sun like a vast earthen carpet, each one needing careful watching, turning lest they warp or crack before they even face the fire. It's a process demanding patience, precision, and an almost intuitive understanding of the clay's temperament. And then the kilns. Ah, the kilns. Towering structures, belching smoke in an intense, shimmering heat that you can feel even from a distance. These are the fiery wombs where mere clay is transformed into the durable, almost eternal substance of your world. Trying to get a consistent firing temperature from some of those older, updraft kilns is like trying to reason with a stubborn bull. Mostly smoke, a lot of heat, and an unpredictable outcome. You swear some kilns have personalities, mostly grumpy ones, that the kiln masters learn to coax and appease with specific types of fuel or carefully managed airflow. The skill of these artisans, knowing just when the bricks are perfectly fired, not too brittle, not too soft, is something you deeply respect. The fuel they consume is another constant concern. Vast quantities of wood, brush, and dung, gathered from miles around. Sometimes, looking towards the kiln district at dusk, seeing the pall of smoke hanging in the air, you get a faint prickle of unease about the ever-receding tree line. But the city's hunger for bricks is insatiable. And how is this incredible uniformity maintained across not just this city, but all the others? Near and far, historians still argue whether the incredible uniformity of brick size across the entire civilization points to a powerful central authority dictating standards, or to an exceptionally stable and widespread guild of artisans sharing common practices. You've sat in enough council meetings to know that powerful central authority often means endless debates and committees. So perhaps it's the quiet, shared knowledge of the craftsman that truly binds your world together. The pressure for quality control is immense. A bad batch can mean delays, structural weaknesses, and pointed questions from overseers and patrons. The number of bricks you've personally had to reject for being slightly warped, cracked, or improperly fired, you could probably build a very respectable, albeit rather wobbly, summer palace with them by now. Perhaps downriver where the breeze is cooler? Most of these rejects get crushed for grog to temper new clay or used in foundations where their imperfections matter less. But it's still a waste of effort and fuel. Though you recall with a faint smile, there was that one incident last year where a kiln was overfired due to a sleepy attendant, producing a batch of bricks that were almost purplish black and slightly vitrified. Initially declared a disaster, a wealthy merchant took a liking to their unusual sheen, and suddenly, for a brief, perplexing season, midnight bricks were all the rage for decorative flourishes on courtyard walls. You even saw a few incorporated into a shrine, much to the consternation of the more traditional priests. The fad passed, of course, and the remaining midnight bricks were quietly relegated to lining storage pits. As you lie there, the image of endless stacks of bricks, perfect and identical, fills your mind. They represent order, stability, the very framework of your society. Each one a small, humble object, yet collectively, they possess a colossal strength. They are the silent testament to your people's ingenuity and their tireless labor. It's a heavy thought, this burden of baked earth, this constant cycle of creation and consumption. The responsibility to ensure there are always enough, always of the right quality, always where they are needed most, is a foundational layer of your many worries. The city sleeps, unaware of the mountains of clay moved, the forests consumed, the rivers of sweat expended, all for these simple rectangular blocks. But and as the first hints of true, deep drowsiness finally begin to cloud your thoughts, you offer a silent nod of respect to the brickmakers, the kiln masters, and the earth itself, before succumbing to the quiet darkness. The heavy cloak of sleep enfolds you, pulling you down into its quiet depths. Yet, even here, in the landscape of dreams, the city persists. It's no longer the stark grid or the fiery kilns that command your attention, but something more serpentine, more secretive. Your dreaming mind drifts downwards, through the foundations of buildings, past the cool earth, into the hidden network that lies beneath the slumbering streets. It's the sanitation system, the city's silent symphony of flowing water and carefully constructed channels. And even in sleep, you are its conductor, listening to its rhythms, sensing its vital pulse. This intricate web, largely unseen and unheard by the citizens above, is as crucial to their well-being as the grain in the granaries or the walls that offer protection. You visualize the journey of waste, an unglamorous but essential voyage, from individual homes, where many houses boast their own toilets, often simple but effective commodes, connected directly to this comprehensive, city-wide covered drainage system. The wastewater begins its travels. These household drains, sometimes terracotta pipes, sometimes brick-lined channels, are the small tributaries feeding into the larger street drains. These, in turn, are minor streams flowing into the main collector sewers, the great underground rivers that carry the city's refuse away to outfalls or deep soakage pits beyond the inhabited areas. It's a marvel of coordination, a testament to forethought, all constructed with those same standardized kiln-fired baked bricks you were mulling over earlier. Their durability essential in this constantly damp, demanding environment. You sometimes think your real title should be Chief Conductor of the Subterranean Orchestra of Effluent. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it at council meetings, though, and probably wouldn't win you many dinner invitations. The public health implications of this system are never far from your waking thoughts, and they percolate even in your dreams. You've seen on your travels to other, less meticulously planned places, the sickness that festers where waste mingles with drinking water, where filth accumulates in the alleyways. Here, the streets are remarkably clean, the air relatively fresh thanks to this unseen network, fewer flies, less disease, a healthier populace. These are the quiet dividends of good sanitation. It's a preventative magic. This constant, gentle flushing away of what could harm. You picture the children playing in the lanes, healthier, stronger, and feel a deep, quiet satisfaction. This, more than the perfectly straight streets, is a legacy worth building. The engineering itself is a point of pride. The precise gradients, so subtle yet so critical, ensuring a steady flow without stagnation. The clever use of sediment traps and sump pits at key junctions to catch heavier debris, making maintenance easier. The manholes, often covered with sturdy baked bricks or sometimes stone slabs, providing access for inspection and cleaning, though you always wince when you see children playing too close to an unsecured one. Each component is a result of careful observation, of trial and error, of knowledge passed down and refined. The number of things people try to flush away or allow to slip into the street drains, you're half expecting to find a lost Zebbo calf in the main collector one of these days. Honestly, you mutter in your sleep. If it doesn't come out of you or a tap, it doesn't belong in the drain. People proper use is as important as proper design. And then there are the crews, the unsung heroes who brave the darkness and the unique atmosphere of the larger channels. You make a mental note to ensure they get their extra ration of oil and perhaps a bonus of fresh barley this week. It's not pleasant work, but their diligence keeps the entire system from collapsing into a fragrant nightmare. You've heard them. Sometimes. Their voices echoing strangely as they work in the main conduits, and you know they have their own ways of coping. Some of the older hands talk of drain spirits that need to be placated with a small offering before entering a particularly troublesome section, or they perform little rituals to ward off bad luck or the clinging odors. It's a quirky little superstition. Perhaps. But if it helps them do their job, who are you to question it? Historians still argue whether the primary impetus for such elaborate sanitation was driven more by a desire for ritual purity and olfactory comfort, or by an empirical understanding of hygiene and disease prevention? You suspect. Much like with the fresh water systems, it's a bit of both. A clean body, a clean home, a clean spirit, and a city that doesn't smell like a latrine pit in high summer are all desirable outcomes. Whatever the initial motivation. Of course, the system isn't infallible. A sudden downpour can overwhelm certain sections if the outfalls aren't perfectly clear. A collapsed portion of an older drain, perhaps built before your stricter oversight, can cause backups that quickly make their presence known to the noses of the neighborhood. These failures are odorous, public reminders of the silent work being done beneath their feet. Explaining the complex interplay of inflow, gradient, and outflow capacity to a newly appointed alderman who seems to believe water just magically knows where to go is a special kind of patience test. Yes, esteemed councilman, it knows because we meticulously told it where to go, with thousands of carefully placed bricks, a great deal of applied mathematics, and the sweat of many laborers. You sigh in your sleep, the weight of this responsibility settling upon you. But it's a good weight. Mostly. A weight that means life in your city is safer, cleaner, and more orderly than it would otherwise be. The silent symphony plays on, a deep, subterranean lullaby. And for a while, at least, your own thoughts flow as smoothly as the waters in the drains, carrying you further into the night. The deep, dark well of sleep holds you for a few precious hours. The silent symphony of the drains a distant, soothing hum. But as the night wears on, inching towards the faintest promise of dawn, you stir. Perhaps it's the cry of a night bird, or the first almost imperceptible shift in the air as the land prepares to greet the sun. Your mind, still tethered to its responsibilities, drifts from the city's internal workings to its lifelines, the vast, sprawling network of trade that nourishes and sustains it. The quiet hum of the drains fades, replaced by the imagined creak of heavily laden ox carts, the distant chanting of boatmen on the great river, the murmur of myriad languages in the marketplace. By day, the docks and city gates are a vibrant chaos of arrivals and departures. By night, in your restless mind, they are a source of simmering anxiety, A list of what ifs and when wills. You try to sleep, but your mind is a ledger, its pages illuminated by moonlight filtering through the window. 10 cartloads of copper from the far-off Ketri mines, overdue by a week. 20 bales of fine woven cotton, destined for export, perhaps even to Dillman across the churning sea, still awaiting transport and the right tide. One increasingly neurotic city planner definitely needs more sleep. It's a balanced account, really. If you don't count the mounting deficit in your own rest, the sheer variety of goods that flow into your city is astounding. Lapis lazuli, that deep celestial blue stone, making its arduous journey from the high mountains of Badakhshan. Carnelian, the color of sunset, from the hills of Gujarat. Gold, silver, and tin. The crucial ingredients for the bronze that equips your soldiers and adorns your elite, hauled over treacherous mountain passes and across sun-baked plains. The Indus Valley civilization engaged in extensive long-distance trade, with evidence of Harappan seals and goods found as far afield as Mesopotamia, a fact that always fills you with a mix of pride and trepidation. Pride in the reach of your people, trepidation for the brave souls who undertake such perilous journeys. And in return, your city is no mere passive recipient. Its workshops hum with industry, transforming these raw materials into coveted finished goods, finely crafted pottery, elegant and utilitarian, intricate beadwork, shimmering with carnelian and steatite, lustrous textiles, dyed in vibrant hues, precisely cast bronze tools and gleaming ornaments, and, of course, the ever-reliable agricultural surplus, grains and cotton, fundamental to the regional economy. You picture the caravans heading out, laden with the fruits of your city's labor, each transaction sealed with those small, intricately carved steatite seals that are the hallmark of your civilization. Their animal motifs and enigmatic script a guarantee of quality and origin. Remember those standardized weights you obsessed over? They ensure fair dealing, or at least that's the idea. But oh, the woes that plague these vital arteries? Dealing with some of these long-distance traders is like trying to catch smoke with tweezers. Their promises are as shifting as desert sands, and their arrival times are guided more by celestial whimsy or the mood of their pack animals than any actual schedule you can etch onto a clay tablet. You toss and turn, imagining a caravan ambushed by bandits in a narrow defile, or a merchant ship caught in the furious teeth of a monsoon storm, its precious cargo lost to the depths. The overland routes are fraught with peril, flash floods, rock slides, the simple grinding weariness of the journey. The river and sea routes, while perhaps faster for bulk goods, have their own demons shifting sandbars, pirates, and the capricious nature of winds and currents. Historians still argue whether the extensive trade networks were managed by state-controlled organizations, independent merchant guilds, or a complex combination of both, each vying for influence and profit. Honestly, some days it feels like it's managed by sheer luck and the stubbornness of a few grizzled caravan masters who simply refuse to be beaten by deserts or mountains. And when the goods finally arrive, if they arrive, there's the whole performance at the city gates or the newly expanded dockyards you supervised last season. The checking of manifests, the levying of duties a constant source of grumbling, the allocation of warehouse space. You've been pushing for a more streamlined process, but traditions die hard. There's old Rishab, the gate warden for the Western approach, who insists on his peculiar method for inspecting incoming spice shipments. He doesn't just look or weigh, he has this almost comically elaborate ritual of sniffing each sack with a series of dramatic inhalations, claiming his nose can detect not only the quality but also the moral character of the merchant who sent it. You suspect it's mostly theater, but his pronouncements are bizarrely often correct, and the merchants treat him with a mixture of fear and respect. If one more caravan leader tells you his shipment of rare timber from the northern forest was delayed because his lead ox had an existential crisis, contemplating the vastness of the Indus, you might just decree that all future luxury goods must be delivered by specially trained messenger pigeons. Highly impractical. You concede even in your half-awake state, but the image is deeply satisfying to your frayed nerves. The city is a hub, a vital node in a web that stretches for thousands of miles. Its prosperity, its very ability to function and grow, depends on these fragile connections, these trade winds that can bring fortune or frustration in equal measure. A disruption in the tin supply can silence the bronze caster's hammers. A failed monsoon far to the south can mean a scarcity of certain preferred timbers or spices. It's a delicate balance, this reliance on the wider world. You sigh, the sound barely audible in the stillness of your room. The welfare of so many, resting on the backs of tired animals and the courage of far-traveled men. As the sky outside begins to pale from inky black to the soft gray of pre-dawn, you make one last mental note to send an overseer to check on the repairs to the main landing key. Then, with a silent prayer for safe passages and fair winds, you let the tide of exhaustion pull you under once more, hoping for at least another hour of oblivion before the demands of the waking city and its ever-hungry markets call to you. The brief respite gained as dawn approaches is shallow, your mind still churning beneath the surface like the great river after a storm. Thoughts of distant lands and precarious trade routes begin to fade, replaced by a concern far more fundamental, more visceral: the city's beating heart, its storehouse of life, the granary. Perhaps it's the distant, rhythmic thump of an early baker pounding dough, or the scent of wood smoke from a breakfast fire drifting on the morning air. But suddenly, the image of those colossal structures looms large in your pre-awakening thoughts. Ensuring those vast halls are full, the grain within them dry, and the ever-present threat of pests kept at bay, this is the ultimate gamble. A constant, nagging worry that sits heavy in your gut. You picture it now. The main granary complex, its massive brick foundations raising it above the damp earth. A silent, formidable sentinel near the citadel, or perhaps strategically placed along the riverbank for ease of transport. Large, well-ventilated granaries, often built on raised platforms or with sophisticated air duct systems, were prominent structures in major Indus cities, a testament to a society that understood the critical importance of food security. You supervised the last repairs on Granary 7 yourself, insisting on extra layers of bitumen waterproofing on the timber supports for the loading bays. The sheer scale of these buildings, the amount of labor and baked bricks that went into their construction, speaks volumes about their significance. They are not mere storehouses. They are symbols of the city's ability to provide, to endure. Venturing inside one in your mind's eye, the air is thick with the dusty, strangely sweet smell of thousands upon thousands of bushels of wheat and barley. The light is dim, filtering in through narrow ventilation shafts high in the walls, designed to create a draft, but keep out the rain and the worst of the sun's direct heat. Mountains of golden grain stretch away into the gloom, a reassuring sight, yet one that carries an immense responsibility. Moisture is the ever-present enemy, the silent saboteur that can turn a season's hard-won harvest into a moldering, useless heap. You recall endless discussions with the granary keepers about proper aeration, about the rotation of stock, about the telltale signs of damp. Explaining to a nervous village headman why his collective's offering of slightly damp grain can't be accepted into the Central Reserve is a masterclass in diplomacy and olfactory endurance. But it only got a little shower on it on the way here. He might plead, yes, you think grimly. And now it's cultivating a delightful, fuzzy green civilization of mold that could soon rival our own in complexity if we let it. And then there are the pests. Oh, the pests. A shiver, even in your warm bed, runs down your spine. Rats, bold and cunning, their shadowy forms darting between the sacks. Weevils, insidious and relentless, capable of turning sound grain to hollow husks. You swear the rats in the lower sections of Granary 4 are evolving at an alarming rate. Last week, one of your most trusted keepers swore he saw one trying to use a tiny pebble to make some sort of mark on a sack, as if taking its own inventory. They're getting organized, you fret. It's deeply unsettling. This is where the city's feline contingent truly earns its keep. You smile faintly, thinking of the sleek, well-fed granary cats, a quirky but essential part of the workforce. They patrol the shadowy aisles with a silent, lethal grace, revered by the granary staff, each with a name and a favorite sunning spot amidst the sacks. Old Bast, the ginger matriarch, is particularly legendary for her mousing prowess. The keepers say she's worth 10 human guards. The logistics of it all are a planner's nightmare, or perhaps a planner's intricate puzzle. The collection of grain from the surrounding agricultural lands, is it tribute, tax, or communal contribution? The careful weighing, the meticulous record-keeping on countless clay tablets, tracking inflows and outflows, and the distribution. Who gets what? When? And why? Are these stores primarily for state-employed workers? For the army? For dispersal during times of famine? Or do they also play a role in trade? Historians still argue whether these massive granaries primarily served as royal treasuries and centers for state redistribution, or if they also functioned as commercial hubs managed by merchant collectives, with grain acting as a form of currency. Lying here, you feel the weight of all those possibilities. What you know for sure is that an empty granary means a city in peril. This is the core of the gamble. Will the rains come when they should? Will the harvest be bountiful? Will the stores, so carefully managed, last through the dry season? Or worse, through an unexpected drought or flood that wipes out the fields? Sometimes you dream the granary is a giant, terrifying hourglass, the precious grain slowly, inexorably trickling away. Your spectral dream self is tasked with somehow running up the cascade of downflowing sand, desperately trying to refill it before it empties completely. It's not a restful dream, as you can probably imagine. It usually leaves you waking with a jolt, heart pounding. The responsibility is immense. The lives and stability of tens of thousands depend on these calculations, on this vigilance, as the first true light of morning begins to seep into your room. Chasing away the last shadows, you know the granary officials will soon be making their rounds, their daily checks, their constant, quiet war against decay and depletion. And you, rising to meet the day, carry that same knowledge the city awakens, and it is hungry. The gnawing concern for the city's sustenance, the phantom weight of grain, and the scuttling fear of pests, finally recedes as the sun climbs, painting the eastern sky in hues of saffron and rose. You rise from your mat, the sounds of the waking city, the distant rumble of cartwheels on brick-paved streets, the calls of vendors, the lowing of cattle filtering into your dwelling. As you perform your morning ablutions, your gaze, as it so often does, drifts towards the most dominant feature of your urban landscape, the citadel. There it stands, a man-made mountain of packed earth and baked brick, rising sheer and imposing above the sprawling lower town. Its silhouette against the brightening sky is a solemn, unyielding statement, and you find yourself pondering, yes, as you have countless times before, its true purpose, its necessary defenses, and what it truly signifies to the thousands who live in its shadow. Most major Indus cities had a fortified acropolis or citadel mound, typically located to the west of the lower town, which housed important public and possibly religious or administrative structures like the Great Bath and those very granaries that occupied your pre-dawn thoughts. Its sheer scale is a constant reminder of the labor involved. The mountains of earth moved, the kilns that must have burned for years to supply the bricks for its massive ramparts and platforms. You try to explain the Citadel's annual budget for rampart maintenance and guard stipends to the Traders' Council, who mostly just want lower taxes for their incoming goods and, frankly, less impressively thick walls between them and their profits. But does it have to be that tall? One of them invariably whines. Yes, apparently making a solemn, several millennia-lasting statement is an expensive and rather lofty endeavor. What truly goes on within those formidable walls? That's a question that likely occupies many minds in the lower city. Is it primarily the administrative heart, where decisions that shape the lives of everyone are made, where scribes tally tributes and resources on endless clay tablets? Or is it a sacred precinct, the domain of priests and intricate rituals, centered around monumental structures like the Great Bath, its purpose still echoing with watery mysteries? Perhaps it's where the ruling elite reside, in dwellings presumably grander, more spacious than those below. Their lives lived apart, gazing down upon the city they govern. Or, most likely, it's a complex fusion of all these things: a nerve center, a spiritual focus, and a bastion of authority. Sometimes you think the main purpose of the Citadel is to give everyone in the lower town a chronic stiff neck from looking up at it all the time. Its secondary, and perhaps more intentional purpose, is to visually remind them who's in charge of the really big bricks and, by extension, their collective destiny. Its defensive capabilities are undeniable. The towering walls, the strategically placed bastions, the carefully controlled gateways. It's clearly designed to be a place of refuge, a stronghold. But against whom? Or what external enemies? Marauding tribes from the unsettled lands beyond the fertile river plains? Or is it also a symbol of internal control, a means of overawing the populace and ensuring civic order? The height alone offers a commanding view of the surrounding territory and the city itself. You've stood on the highest parapet on a clear day, feeling the wind whip around you, the entire city spread out like a meticulously drawn map at your feet. There's a certain psychology to such elevated spaces, a sense of detachment and oversight that must surely affect those who spend their lives within its confines. And how do the ordinary folk in the bustling streets of the lower town perceive this imposing structure? With awe, respect, fear. Perhaps a simmering resentment at its aloof grandeur, or simply as an accepted, immutable part of their world. Like the river or the sky. The pronouncements that issue from its gates. The ceremonies conducted on its platforms. The armed guards at its entrances all contribute to its mystique. Its air of separation. Historians still argue whether the figures who occupied the citadel were priest-kings, exercising both spiritual and temporal power, elected councils representing various factions, or a more diffuse administrative body. As definitive evidence of singular monarchical rule remains tantalizingly elusive. You've seen the grave faces of those who emerge from its more restricted areas, their expressions unreadable. There are always whispers. Of course, among the city dwellers, and even the lower-ranking functionaries. You've heard tales of a small, rarely used postern gate on the far western side of the citadel, almost hidden by a buttress of the outer wall. The guards who occasionally patrol that desolate stretch whisper stories that it's only ever opened for the most arcane rituals, conducted in deep secrecy or in times of dire, unspoken emergency. Some even claim it leads to ancient tunnels, though no one has ever admitted to seeing them. Who holds the key? Or if there even is one, it is a subject of much hushed speculation. It's probably just a forgotten service entrance. You rationalize, but the stories add another layer to the Citadel's enigmatic persona. You've certainly planned enough routes for tedious, solemn ceremonial processions up and down that main, wide rampart leading to the primary gate. After the third hour of some particularly lengthy ritual in the blazing sun, you're often tempted to suggest they install a well-polished mud brick slide for the return journey down to the lower town. Considerably less dignified, perhaps, but infinitely faster, and frankly more appealing to your pragmatic side. As you prepare to step out into the morning, ready to face the day's myriad tasks, many of which will undoubtedly involve liaising with officials within the citadel or overseeing projects on its slopes, you give it one last look. It's more than just a collection of buildings on a high mound. It's the city's anchor, its enigmatic core, a constant, silent arbiter of power and belief. Its presence shapes not just the skyline, but the very consciousness of the people. The citadel stands, as it has for generations, its purpose multifaceted, its message solemn, its secrets held close within its sun-baked brick heart. The sun arcs across the sky, and your day, filled with the myriad demands of a living, breathing city, progresses. You've consulted with engineers about drain alignments in the newly expanding eastern quarter, mediated a dispute over water rights near the southern gate, and even climbed the citadel ramparts to discuss reinforcement work with a stonemason whose patience is as thin as his chisel is sharp. Now, as evening approaches, or perhaps as you pause during a rare lull in the midday heat, the clamor of the city begins to shift. The official pronouncements from the citadel seem to fade, replaced by a different, more vibrant hum, the collective echo of the artisans' quarters. Even when their hammers fall silent and their wheels cease to spin, the lingering energy of their creations, the ghosts of their industry, permeate the air. Your mind turns to these vital organs of urban life, mentally arranging and rearranging the zones dedicated to the potters, the bead makers, the metallurgists, and all the other skilled hands that shape the material soul of your civilization. These districts are the engine rooms of your city's prosperity. By day, they are a cacophony of productive noise, the rhythmic thud of clay being wedged, the hypnotic whir of potter's wheels, the sharp crack of flint napping stone for intricate beads, the insistent clang of hammer on bronze, the hiss of hot metal quenched in water. The smells are just as potent. The damp earthiness of clay, the acrid bite of smelting fires, the sweet scent of curing wood for tool handles. Sometimes even the delicate fragrance of exotic dyes used for textiles. Archaeological evidence from Indus cities shows distinct areas or quarters for specialized craft production, a sensible clustering of skills and resources. You've spent countless hours planning these zones, trying to balance their needs with the comfort and health of the wider populace. It's not just a matter of neatness on a map. There are intensely practical reasons for grouping them. The potters need access to reliable water sources and open areas for their kilns, preferably downwind of residential sectors, a point you are constantly, and often loudly, reminded of by citizens with sensitive noses. You try telling the Coppersmiths Guild, a notoriously stubborn bunch whose collective lung capacity for argument could rival their furnace bellows, that they need to relocate their 20 perpetually smoking furnaces further downwind of the new granary extension. Their counter-arguments are usually as fiery as their forges, laced with technical jargon about prevailing wind patterns that you suspect they invent on the spot. It requires delicate negotiation, and a good pair of heat-resistant earplugs, or at least a very thick skin. Each craft has its unique fingerprint, its specific demands on space and resources. The bead makers, those patient miracle workers, sit hunched over tiny fragments of carnelian agate and steatite, their fine bronze drills whirring with incredible precision to bore holes almost too small to see. Their workshops are often small, tucked away, filled with the fine dust of semi-precious stones. They are artists, truly. But finding a tiny, perfectly drilled carnelian bead that's been dropped in a dusty workshop is like searching for a specific grain of sand on a riverbank after a flood. You've gently suggested they might consider inventing some sort of magnifying lens, perhaps using polished quartz, but they just squint harder and mutter about the good old days when eyes were sharper. Then there are the metallurgists, transforming dull ore into gleaming tools, weapons, and ornaments. Their need for high-temperature furnaces dictates larger, more isolated compounds. Stockpiles of charcoal or dried dung for fuel, and sturdy anvils that ring with the music of creation. You must also consider the shell workers, their delicate saws and grinders shaping conch and mother-of-pearl into bangles and inlays, and the seal carvers, whose miniature masterpieces in steatite are the very currency of trust and trade. How are these hives of activity organized? Historians still argue whether these craft specializations were primarily organized around hereditary family units passing down skills through generations, with workshops attached to homes, or if more formalized guild-like structures governed training, production standards, and perhaps even collective bargaining for raw materials and prices. You see evidence of both. Family compounds where grandparents, parents, and children all contribute to a specific stage of production. And yet, there's a clear collective identity among, say, the potters of the Riverside District or the bronze workers near the southern wall, suggesting a shared knowledge and perhaps a common voice when dealing with city administrators like yourself. You recall old Manus, the lapidary? A true eccentric whose workshop is a bewildering cavern of rock samples, unfinished projects, and dust bunnies the size of small animals. Yet, from this chaos, he coaxes forth necklaces and pendants of such breathtaking beauty that merchants travel for weeks to acquire them. He claims the spirits of the stones speak to him, which might explain why he rarely speaks to anyone else. Genius, you suppose, rarely tidies up after itself. Managing these zones is an ongoing ballet of supply, demand, and often diplomacy. As the city grows, new areas must be allocated. Sometimes you wish you could just assign workshop locations by lottery, just to shake things up. Congratulations, Urmila the Potter. You're the proud new neighbor of Agni the incense maker, and Harish the fish salter hope you like perpetually fragrant, slightly salty clay. The ensuing chaos would be spectacular, albeit short-lived before the delegations arrived at your office. The reality is a careful consideration of prevailing winds, water access, waste disposal. Remember those drains, and proximity to both raw materials and markets. It's a delicate ecosystem, this industrial heartland. As the last light of day fades and the workshops fall into a deeper quiet, the echoes of their labor remain. The faint scent of wood smoke from a cooling kiln, the glint of a discarded metal shaving, the muffled thump of a potter tidying his space. These are the sounds and sights of a city that not only consumes but creates, a city that transforms the raw earth into objects of utility and beauty. This creative energy, this ingenuity, is as vital to its identity as any solemn pronouncement from the citadel. And you, the planner, are tasked with nurturing it, guiding it, ensuring it has the space and the means to flourish. Long after tonight's echoes have faded into tomorrow's renewed endeavors, the vibrant echoes of the artisan quarters, the remembered clang of metal and the scent of fired clay, begin to soften in your mind as the true quiet of night descends. Your thoughts, however, snag on a thread woven through all that bustling activity, through every transaction in the marketplace, every tally in the granary ledgers, every edict from the citadel, the unwavering, steadfast strength of standards. It's an almost invisible framework, yet it's the very skeleton upon which the flesh of your complex society is built. Without these shared agreements on weight, measure, and identification, the order you strive so hard to maintain would simply crumble into a chaotic heap of disputes and misunderstandings. You lie there, contemplating this silent, pervasive power. Your mind drifts to those unassuming, yet critically important objects. The weights. The Indus Valley civilization had a highly developed system of standardized weights and measures, typically based on a binary and decimal system, with distinctive cubical weights made of meticulously polished chert being common. You can picture them perfectly. The cool, smooth feel of the chert, their satisfying heft, ranging from tiny cubes for weighing precious metals or spices to larger blocks for grains and raw materials. Their precision is remarkable, a testament to a deep understanding of mathematics and a societal commitment to fairness, or at least to the universally accepted appearance of it. You've seen enough merchants try to argue about the spirit of a transaction when their personal, often suspiciously worn down. Weights are clearly lighter than the official city standards. Yes, my friend, you've had to say more than once, a weary patience coloring your tone. And the spirit of this particular transaction is that you're attempting to shortchange the city's reserve by a noticeable margin. Next, maintaining these standards, regularly checking the scales in the marketplace, and verifying the master weights kept under lock and key in the citadel is a tedious but essential task. And it's not just weight. Think of the measures of length, the cubit, the span, the finger's breadth, all needing to be consistent. Whether for laying out a building foundation, weaving a specific width of cloth, or portioning out plots of land, if you had a carnelian bead for every time someone complained that the official city cubit measure was somehow too long when it came to calculating their tax obligations on land yield, you'd have enough to tile the Great Bath lavishly, and probably have enough left over to string a necklace for every citizen in the lower town. It's human nature, you suppose, to quibble when obligations are due, but the standard must hold. It's the line against which all claims are measured. Then there are the seals. Those miniature masterpieces of carved steatite you were admiring from the artisans' workshops earlier. Each one is a tiny ambassador of identity and authority. The intricate animal motifs, the powerful bull, the enigmatic unicorn, the patient zebu, and the line of script above them. What do they truly signify? Ownership, certainly. The mark of a specific merchant house, a guild, or an official from the citadel. They are pressed into wet clay, securing bales of cotton or jars of oil, a silent guarantee that the contents are as stated and have not been tampered with. Their widespread use, from the smallest village to the grandest city, across hundreds of miles, speaks to a shared understanding, a common language of commerce and administration. You've seen old Cabas, the spice merchant, who refuses to use any but his grandfather's personal weight, a chipped chert cube that's probably seen more monsoons than you have. He swears it's lucky, that it knows true value. And surprisingly, his measures often align closely enough with the official ones that the inspectors, after a theatrical sigh, usually let him be. It's a small human quirk in an otherwise rigidly defined system. And the script itself. Those elegant, mysterious characters that adorn the seals, that are incised on pottery, occasionally found on small copper tablets. It's the intellectual sinew binding your civilization together. You can read it, and of course, it's part of your training, your daily life. You use it for inventories, for dispatches, for records of land and resources. But even as you use it, you ponder its full nature. Historians still argue whether the Indus script represents a full linguistic system capable of conveying complex narratives, poetry, and abstract philosophical ideas, or if it served primarily as an administrative and economic notation system for tracking goods, names, and transactions. Looking at the brief, often repetitive inscriptions on the seals, you sometimes lean towards the latter, though there are moments when you see a particularly unusual combination of signs that you wonder if there isn't something more, some deeper layer of meaning just beyond your grasp. Trying to decipher some of the apprentices' first clumsy attempts at writing official script on damp clay is an adventure in itself. Sometimes their efforts look less like a record of grain distribution and more like a herd of wild ibexes had an energetic dance party across the tablet before it dried. These standards, the unwavering weights, the consistent measures, the ubiquitous seals, the shared script, they are the quiet scaffolding of your world. They build trust, facilitate exchange, and allow for a level of organization that would be impossible otherwise. They are the steadfast strength that allows your cities to function, to trade across vast distances, to manage resources for tens of thousands. It's not as dramatic as the citadel's ramparts or as immediately vital as the granary's stores. But this commitment to uniformity, to a common understanding, is perhaps the most profound innovation of your people. It's a subtle power, a gentle insistence on order that holds everything, from the grandest public works to the smallest marketplace bargain, together in a cohesive whole. As you finally drift towards a more settled sleep, it's this underlying framework of agreement, this silent hum of accord, that offers a measure of peace to your planner's weary mind. That fragile peace, born from contemplating the city's underlying order and its steadfast standards, is unfortunately short-lived. As you drift in the deeper currents of sleep, a subtle change in the night air, perhaps a sigh of wind through the eaves or the distant, almost imperceptible tremor of the earth that speaks of the great river's unseen power, snags your consciousness. The comforting hum of human accord fades, replaced by a far more ancient and unsettling sound in your mind's ear, the river's restless rumbles. It's a constant presence in your life. The vast, sprawling Indus, or perhaps one of its mighty tributaries. The very reason your city thrives here. But tonight, its life-giving qualities are overshadowed by the latent threat it always holds. A slumbering giant that can awaken in fury. You've seen its benevolence, you may. Of course, on the thick, fertile silt it deposits season after season, renewing the vitality of the farmlands that feed your tens of thousands. The broad highway it provides for trade, connecting you to distant resources and markets. The fresh water it offers, drawn into countless channels for irrigation and, with care, for drinking. Your city is a child of the river, suckled at its muddy breast. But you've also witnessed its wrath, the terrifying, thunderous roar when it swells in flood, transformed from a placid serpent into a raging dragon, its muddy coils engulfing fields, homes, and sometimes lives. Many Indus Valley cities were located on floodplains and show evidence of repeated flooding, with some structures being rebuilt multiple times on raised foundations, and your own city is no exception. Those massive brick platforms supporting the citadel and the granaries, they weren't built that high just for the view. They are a testament to bitter experience, a hard-learned respect for the river's destructive potential. You find yourself mentally reviewing the state of the flood defenses, the primary embankments along the western edge, the secondary bunds protecting the lower town's more vulnerable sectors. Are there any weak spots reported by the patrols? Any signs of unusual seepage? That section near the old ferry landing, where the current always seems to bite hardest at the bank. You made a note to have it reinforced with extra layers of baked brick and woven reed matting before the next inundation season. You've tried explaining to the river in your more exasperated moments that its designated channel is over there, a perfectly serviceable course you've even helped dredge in places. It listens about as well as a well-fed toddler told its bedtime. Mostly, it just does what it wants, and you and your teams are left to clear up the mess and rebuild. Always a little higher, a little stronger, if possible. Your emergency flood plan, meticulously detailed on several clay tablets, basically has 3 core stages. 1. Watch the water rise with increasing alarm. 2. Express profound and unified civic concern. 3. Start building everything important significantly higher. It's a robust system, if somewhat reactive. It's a work in progress, that plan. Then there's the slower, more insidious threat of erosion. The river is a hungry beast, constantly nibbling at its banks, sometimes gently, sometimes tearing away huge chunks of precious agricultural land or threatening the foundations of outlying structures. The amount of good, fertile land that river has swallowed just in your own lifetime. You sometimes suspect it's diligently building its own vast, underwater farming empire downstream. Probably has better crop yields than you do. 2. The smug, gurgling thing, untroubled by pests or the need for standardized weights. You've commissioned gabions filled with rocks and rubble to be placed at critical points. Encourage the planting of deep-rooted reeds and grasses along vulnerable stretches. But it's a relentless, ongoing battle against a foe that never tires. You recall old Amma, the woman who lives in a small hut by the riverside, a so-called river whisperer. Most dismiss her as eccentric, muttering her cryptic observations about the color of the water, the behavior of the fishhawks, the patterns of the foam. Yet, more than once, her quiet predictions of a sudden rise in water levels or a shift in the main current have proven uncannily accurate. Days before the official watchers on the Citadel Towers noticed anything amiss, even you, a man of plans and pragmatism, have learned to discreetly inquire about Amma's latest pronouncements when the air feels heavy with the threat of flood. Her knowledge is of a different kind, an intimate, almost instinctual understanding, born from a lifetime spent listening to the river's subtle language. It's a humbling reminder that not all wisdom is etched on clay tablets or measured with plumb bobs. The sheer destructive power of these inundations makes you ponder the bigger picture, the long-term fate of your city, and indeed, all the settlements strung like beads along these great waterways. Historians still argue whether the periodic devastating floods were a primary factor in the eventual decline of some Indus urban centers, or if they were a manageable, albeit challenging aspect of life that the civilization adapted to for centuries through engineering and resilience. You've seen the layers of silt in excavation pits, evidence of past deluges that would have been catastrophic. Yet, life always returns, rebuilds, adapts. Is this resilience infinite, or does the river, in its patient, timeless way, eventually win every contest? The restless rumbles continue in your mind, a deep bass note beneath the lighter anxieties of urban management. This constant dance with the river, this blend of dependence and fear, is fundamental to your existence. It shapes your architecture, your economy, your very worldview. You can channel it, divert it, build walls against it, but you can never truly tame it. It is a wild god, benevolent and terrible by turns. As the first faint light of dawn truly begins to bleed into the sky, you consciously try to push aside these watery worries. The river will do what it will do. Your task, and that of your city, is to endure, to adapt, to continue to draw life from its currents while respecting its formidable power. The rumbles soften, just a little, as you resolve, yet again, to meet its challenge. The raw power of the river, its restless rumbles now a receding echo in your mind as true dawn breaks, gives way to the sounds of the city stirring to full life. The distant clatter from the artisan quarter, the first calls of street vendors, the muffled sounds of families beginning their day within their homes. These are the affirmations of human presence, of the community you strive to house and serve. Having confronted the primal forces of nature, your thoughts now turn inward, to the very fabric of urban life, the spaces you design for these souls. It's a delicate, constant balancing act. This task of weaving together the vibrant, bustling public squares and communal wells with the serene, sheltered intimacy of private courtyards. Each is essential for a city that not only functions but also nurtures the human spirit. You picture the main streets, those broad arteries you obsessed over, now filling with people. Carts laden with goods rumble towards the market. Children dart in and out of doorways. Neighbors pause to exchange morning greetings. These aren't just thoroughfares. They are vital conduits of social life. And the public wells, their brick parapets already cool and damp, become morning nexuses where news is shared as water pots are filled. Indus Valley cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa featured well-planned residential areas, with access to public streets and sophisticated drainage. Public wells were also common, a testament to an understanding that communal resources are the lifeblood of a community. You try to create a serene public square, perhaps with a few strategically planted shade trees, envisioning a place for quiet contemplation or learned discussion, and within a week, it invariably transforms into an impromptu goat market, a children's racetrack, and the preferred napping spot for 3 stray dogs. The souls you design for clearly have very active, and often commercially minded, bodies. Then, there are the private sanctuaries, the homes themselves. The characteristic courtyard house design, so prevalent across your civilization, is a marvel of simple ingenuity. Houses typically built around a central courtyard provided privacy and light, creating a cool, sheltered heart within each dwelling. This inward focus offers families a refuge from the bustle of the street, a space for their own lives, their own rhythms. You've overseen the laying out of countless such residential blocks, ensuring each plot has its proper access, its connection to those vital, unseen drains you fret over. Some private courtyards you've glimpsed are so meticulously planned for tranquility, with carefully tended plants and pots and perhaps a small, shaded alcove. You suspect the owners have trained their children and household staff to communicate exclusively via interpretive dance to avoid disturbing the profound peace. You often wish they'd offer city-wide lessons, especially to the residents of Sector 9, whose morning squabbles are legendary. The variations are endless, Of course, despite the seeming uniformity of the grid, from the modest dwellings of craftsmen, their courtyards perhaps doubling as workspaces, to the more expansive homes of merchants or officials, with multiple rooms opening onto larger, more secluded central areas. Historians still argue whether the general uniformity in house construction and the layout of residential blocks indicate a relatively egalitarian society, or if subtle variations in size, materials, and access to amenities reflect a more nuanced social hierarchy. You see the differences daily. Differences. A larger gateway, finer quality bricks, perhaps a private well within the courtyard instead of reliance on the communal one. These are the quiet markers of status. Even in a city that prides itself on order and a certain shared civic identity. It's this interplay between the public and the private that fascinates you. The way the city breathes through these contrasting spaces. The narrow lanes, designed more for pedestrian passage than for carts, offer a sense of intimacy, a transition zone between the hubbub of the main street and the sanctity of the home. You've noticed, too, a charmingly quirky habit in some parts of the city families creating tiny, almost hidden niches on their flat rooftops, sometimes adorned with a single painted stone or a small clay figurine. These aren't grand shrines, but personal and private areas where individuals can retreat for a moment of solitude, to gaze at the stars, or simply to be alone with their thoughts, away from the communal life below. It's a silent testament to the soul's need for its own small, sacred space, even amidst the density of urban living. Of course, for every rooftop poet, there's a ground-level dispute. The number of complaints you receive about my neighbor's cooking smoke always blows directly into my courtyard, usually when I'm trying to dry my best linens. You're seriously considering a citywide decree that all meals must henceforth be boiled. It wouldn't be popular, you concede, but your office and the city's air might be significantly quieter. Ultimately, designing these spaces is about more than just efficient land use or functional shelter. It's about crafting a habitat where human life can flourish in all its complexity. It's about ensuring there are places for boisterous commerce and quiet reflection, for communal celebration and private grief, for the forging of public identity and the nurturing of individual souls. The city is a stage, and you, as its planner, are tasked with setting it in a way that allows for all the dramas of human existence to unfold with a measure of grace and dignity. As you finally step out into the full light of day, the city's myriad voices rising around you, you carry this responsibility with you to continue shaping these spaces for souls, ensuring that your city of brick and order also remains a city of breath and heart. The morning sun climbs higher, casting sharper shadows and illuminating the vibrant tapestry of your city in full swing. As you navigate the bustling streets, perhaps on your way to inspect a new section of public works, or to a meeting within the Citadel's less public chambers, you're struck, not for the first time, by the sheer, almost effortless functionality of it all. Tens of thousands of people, a complex web of trades, industries, and households, all coexisting, all moving with a discernible rhythm. And it makes you wonder, as you often do when you have a rare moment for abstract thought amidst the practicalities of your day, how does it all work so smoothly? What is the unseen hand that guides this intricate dance, maintaining such remarkable order without the overt, often brutal, displays of power so common in other lands you've heard tales of? You've seen the wide-eyed envoys from distant kingdoms, merchants from across the great waters or the high mountain passes. They speak of god-kings who command armies through sheer divine will, of colossal statues built in their honor, of palaces so vast they dwarf entire sections of your own city. They describe monumental carvings depicting their rulers smiting enemies or receiving tribute from cowed subjects. Here, unlike many contemporary Bronze Age civilizations, the Indus Valley civilization has yielded little clear archaeological evidence of kings in that bombastic style. Very few grand palaces clearly identifiable as royal residences, and a scarcity of monumental art depicting specific rulers. You just nod politely when you hear these foreign tales and think to yourself, that's nice, you know how our drains work. Our bricks are standardized, and most of our citizens have access to clean water. It's all about priorities, isn't it? And perhaps a different understanding of what constitutes true strength in a society. So, how is this order maintained? Are there laws etched onto prominent pillars for all to see and fear? Not that you've noticed. Are there legions of guards patrolling every street, ready to enforce civic obedience with a heavy hand? Only a modest number, mostly at the gates, the citadel, and guarding the granaries. It seems to be something more subtle, more ingrained. Perhaps it's the shared understanding of the way things are done, a powerful current of custom and tradition that guides behavior more effectively than any edict. You and others in administrative roles certainly play your part, planning, allocating, mediating, but your authority mod too feels less about command and more about stewardship, about maintaining a system that largely runs on its own accumulated wisdom. You think of the little interactions that keep the peace, the way disputes, minor disagreements over property lines or market stall placements, are often resolved. There isn't always a formal summons to the citadel. Instead, you often see the involved parties meeting with a respected elder, perhaps old Sarala who sells medicinal herbs near the west gate, or young Rishan, the surprisingly astute carpenter whose workshop is a common gathering spot. These unofficial dispute resolvers, armed with nothing but their reputation for fairness and a deep understanding of community norms, often manage to untangle conflicts with a quiet word, a shared cup of barley water, or a simple but pragmatic solution that leaves both parties feeling heard, if not entirely victorious. Their authority isn't proclaimed, it's earned, and it's surprisingly effective. It's one of the many threads in this fabric of order, woven by an unseen hand. Of course, the question of who ultimately holds the reins of power, however lightly they may be held, is a constant source of contemplation. Historians still argue whether the apparent absence of overt symbols of monarchical power signifies a truly egalitarian society, a form of collective governance by committee or priestly councils, or simply a ruling elite that chose to express its authority in less monumental and more subtle ways, perhaps through control of trade, resources like the granaries, or religious ideology. Sometimes, usually when you're bogged down in the third committee meeting of the day debating the optimal curvature for a new drain pipe, you almost wish for a giant, all-powerful, benevolent dictator, just for a day, someone who could simply decree that, yes, that wobbly retaining wall does need to be fixed this very afternoon, without further discussion on the potential spiritual implications of using sun-dried versus kiln-fired bricks for eastward-facing repairs. Efficiency, you sigh internally, is sometimes sacrificed at the altar of consensus. Yet this system, whatever its precise nature, demonstrably works. The cities are prosperous, the trade routes busy, the crafts flourish, and the populace, by and large, seems content, or at least not actively rebellious. Perhaps this subtle governance, this reliance on shared values and communal responsibility, is more resilient than the rule of autocrats which can shatter with the death of a single strongman. Your system of gentle nudging towards civic responsibility, as you sometimes sardonically call it, is mostly effective in day-to-day matters. Except you concede when it comes to encouraging certain households to regularly clean out their own domestic soak pits or to stop tossing fish bones into the street drains. Then, the nudging often requires a much longer, firmer stick and a very direct, non-subtle tone of voice from one of your junior inspectors. As you continue on your rounds, a small cog in this vast, well-oiled yet enigmatic machine, you marvel at its enduring strength. This order, born not of fear but of function, not of overt domination but of shared purpose, is perhaps the greatest achievement of your civilization. It's a quiet power, an unseen hand that guides millions. And understanding its true gears and levers remains one of the most profound ponderings of your waking day, just as it often visits you in the quiet of the night. As you move through the city, your mind still gently buzzing with the puzzle of its intrinsic order. Your path might take you past one of the more enigmatic structures your civilization has produced. Perhaps the Great Bath on the Citadel, or a lesser, yet still significant, public edifice. The sight of it, even in the midst of a mundane administrative day, shifts your thoughts from the practicalities of governance to another essential thread in the city's fabric, the realm of ritual. These carefully constructed spaces, dedicated to communal ceremony and perhaps private devotion, are not mere addendums to urban life. They are integral to its rhythm, its identity, and likely unto that very unseen hand of social cohesion you were just contemplating. Integrating these requisite realms for the soul into the material plan of the city is a key, and often perplexing, part of your responsibilities. The Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, or its equivalent in your own metropolis, is the most obvious example. A prominent, meticulously constructed public water tank on the Citadel. The Great Bath is widely believed to have been used for ritual purification or other significant religious ceremonies. Owing to its careful bitumen-sealed brickwork, its imposing steps leading down into the basin, and the surrounding colonnades and small chambers, you've overseen its periodic draining and cleaning, a monumental task in itself, and marveled at the engineering that keeps its waters pure, or at least as pure as a heavily used public bathing facility can be. You try scheduling routine maintenance, like repointing the brickwork or clearing the inlet channels, around the presumed ceremonial calendar passed down by the priestly attendants. It's like trying to predict when your most eccentric and revered great-aunt will decide to host a major family gathering. It requires a lot of respectful guesswork, a flexible timeline, and a backup plan involving a great many buckets and apologies if you get the timing wrong. What exact rituals took place there remains shrouded in a dignified, ancestral quiet. Were they daily ablutions for a select priesthood? Seasonal purification rites for the whole community? Or at least its representatives? Celebratory immersions tied to harvests or celestial events? The space itself speaks of importance, of solemnity. You've also noted the so-called assembly hall or pillared hall structures, also often found on the Citadel. Their exact purpose even more opaque. Were these for civic councils, religious congregations, or perhaps a combination where the sacred and the secular were not so distinctly separated as they sometimes feel in your more bureaucratic moments? Planning such structures involves considerations beyond mere function, their orientation, their visibility, the way they command the space around them, all contribute to their perceived significance. But it's not just these grand public arenas that speak of ritual life. The city hums with smaller, more intimate expressions of belief. In many homes, even modest ones, you know of the presence of fire altars. Small, often brick-lined pits where offerings might be made, or sacred flames tended. Then there are the ubiquitous terracotta figurines, those distinctive mother goddess figures, robust and often adorned with elaborate headdresses and jewelry, and the charmingly stylized animals bulls, rams, birds, even toy-like creatures with movable heads or wheels. The sheer number of these figurines found in excavations, or sometimes, frustratingly, clogging up a perfectly good drain. You sometimes think if everyone who ever accidentally dropped or purposefully discarded one got a fine, the city treasury would overflow, funding public works for a decade, though, admittedly, some of them are quite charming in their own rustic way, if a bit anatomically optimistic in their depictions of fertility. These small icons suggest a daily, household level of ritual, a personal connection to the forces believed to govern life, luck, and prosperity. How do all these practices, from the grand spectacle to the humble hearthside offering, contribute to the city's unity? Historians still argue whether the dominant religious practices of the Indus people were centered on an organized priesthood and public temple-based worship, akin to what is known from Mesopotamia or Egypt, or if they were more focused on household rituals, animistic beliefs, and reverence for natural forces like water, sacred trees, and specific animals. You see evidence for both. The imposing structures on the citadel suggest some level of organized public ceremony, requiring specialized knowledge and personnel. Yet the profusion of domestic ritual items points to a deeply personal and widely diffused spiritual life. Perhaps it's this blend, this ability for the individual to connect with the sacred in their own home, as well as participate in larger communal rites, that foster such a strong sense of shared identity and belonging. Of course, accommodating these communal expressions of faith within the meticulously planned city can present its own unique logistical headaches. Planning a major procession route, for instance, from a specific residential quarter through the marketplace and up to the citadel for a seasonal festival, ensuring it doesn't entirely paralyze the western trade quarter or create a 3-hour ox cart traffic jam, requires the strategic genius of a battle commander and the patience of a saint, especially when half the participants in the procession insist on stopping for freshly made sweetmeats at Bimmel's stall, which is invariably located at the narrowest point in the entire route. Then there are the auspicious timings dictated by astrological alignments or ancient tradition. Sometimes it feels like every significant ritual, from every minor cult and major temple, must occur during the second Tuesday after the first full moon following the barley harvest, preferably at sunset, when everyone also needs to be using the main river access point for their own private ablutions. The ensuing scheduling conflicts make you yearn for a simpler, less spiritually demanding calendar. Yet, despite the occasional planning nightmare, you understand the profound importance of these spaces and these moments. They are the arenas where collective anxieties are soothed, where communal joys are celebrated, where the city reaffirms its connection to the divine, to the cycles of nature and to each other. They are the requisite realms for the soul, as vital to the city's well-being as its granaries or its drains. They provide the spiritual mortar that helps bind the bricks of your ordered society together, contributing to that remarkable, enduring, and often puzzling harmony you so frequently ponder. The rhythm of the city, its ceremonies and its commerce, its quiet moments of household devotion and its bustling public life, all unfold within the protective embrace of its mighty ramparts. But as your day progresses, your thoughts, like a hawk circling ever higher, inevitably drift beyond these familiar brick horizons. A thriving city is a hungry city, hungry for timber to build its houses and fuel its kilns, hungry for metals to forge its tools and adorn its people, hungry for stone, for exotic goods, for all the myriad resources that cannot be found or cultivated within its immediate shadow. And so, your planner's mind expands, grappling with the complexities of managing resources from afar, the tantalizing and terrifying prospect of new settlements, and the ever-present need to defend the periphery that sustains you all. You consider the vast network that feeds your metropolis. Timber, great logs of deodar or sisu, felled in distant forests, perhaps floated down the great river or its tributaries. A slow, ponderous journey. The logistics are staggering. Organizing the cutting crews, ensuring their supplies, arranging for transport, and dealing with the inevitable delays. It's a constant headache. Trying to get a reliable progress report back from the northern timber camps is like sending a message in a bottle during the height of a particularly enthusiastic monsoon. Eventually, something comes back, usually inscribed on a damp piece of bark, slightly chewed at the edges, and blaming creatively malevolent badgers for all significant delays and missing supplies. Then there are the metals copper from the Aravalli Hills, tin from sources perhaps even further afield, gold dust panned from remote mountain streams. The Indus civilization established outposts far from the core river valley regions, such as Shortugai in northern Afghanistan. A remote speck on the map primarily focused, it's believed, on the procurement of precious lapis lazuli and possibly other valuable highland resources. That single outpost, so distant, speaks volumes about the reach and ambition of your civilization, its willingness to project its influence far beyond the fertile plains. Planning for such resource acquisition is a specialized art. It involves not just identifying the source, but also establishing secure routes, perhaps setting up small, fortified staging posts and negotiating with local populations who might already inhabit those resource-rich areas. Sometimes it's trade, a fair exchange of your city's finished goods for their raw materials. Other times, it might involve establishing a more direct presence, a mining camp, or a quarrying operation under your city's oversight. You often rely on a handful of incredibly skilled and trustworthy individuals for these ventures. There's old Narvi, for instance, the legendary wilderness guide, whose knowledge of the trackless wastes and hidden mountain passes is unparalleled. He always insists on bringing his surprisingly well-behaved and fiercely loyal pet mongoose, Skitters, on every expedition, claiming the creature has an uncanny nose for freshwater springs and approaching sandstorms. Given Narvi's success rate, no one questions his choice of traveling companion anymore, not even when Skitters sits in on high-level planning meetings, attentively grooming his whiskers. And then, the even more daunting prospect. New settlements? Sometimes. It's driven by population pressure within the crowded confines of the established cities. Other times, it's a strategic decision, a way to secure a vital resource nexus or a key point on a trade route. You've been involved in sketching out preliminary plans for a potential new outpost near the copper mines. The thought of starting again, from the virgin earth, laying out a grid, organizing water supply and sanitation for a fledgling community, it's both exhilarating and exhausting. You sometimes dream of establishing a new settlement where the primary building material is something other than baked brick. Woven reeds, perhaps, or just very large, comfortable, easily movable tents. Your back and your brain ache just thinking about sourcing and standardizing another million-brick city from scratch. Historians still argue whether these distant settlements were centrally controlled colonies, meticulously planned and administered from the core cities, independent migrant communities maintaining cultural ties and trade links, or simply specialized trading posts established through pragmatic local alliances. Looking at the plans for the proposed copper town, you suspect it's a messy combination of all three. This outward gaze also brings with it the burden of defense, not just of the city's immediate walls, but of its wider interests. Those timber camps, mining outposts, and agricultural villages that supply your city are all vulnerable. The trade caravans snaking across the landscape are tempting targets. Your scouts recently reported unidentified and frankly quite unsettling rustling noises in the western hills, along with some unusually large footprints. Could be a rival tribe testing your patrols. Could be a new species of exceptionally large and disgruntled wild boar. Could just be Inderjit the Scout, having a bit too much fermented barley brew with his midday meal again. Budgeting for enhanced perimeter vigilance against potentially mythical oversized forest creatures is a new and somewhat challenging line item to explain to the City Council's Finance Committee. The weight of these external affairs presses upon you. The city is not an island, it's a hub, a nexus, drawing in sustenance and projecting influence. Its internal order, its spiritual harmony, its very survival depend on this constant, complex interaction with the world beyond its ramparts. Your role as planner, therefore, extends far beyond the neat lines of the city grid. It encompasses whispering forests, distant mountains, and the dusty tracks that connect your civilization in a vast, sprawling, and often precarious web. As the afternoon wears on, you know that reports from these far-flung endeavors will be trickling in, demanding your attention, your decisions, your ceaseless effort to keep the lifelines of your great city secure and flowing. The day, a long, drawn-out tapestry woven with threads of civic duty, meticulous planning, and the endless, churning thoughts of a city's intricate life, finally draws to its close. The sun has long since dipped below the horizon, and the deep, velvety darkness of a moonless night enfolds Harappa, or Mohenjo-Daro, or whichever great hub of Indus life you call home. You are back on your woven reed mat, every bone in your body aching with a profound weariness, every corner of your mind finally, blessedly, quieting down. The sounds of the city have muted to a gentle whisper, a distant dog's bark, The soft rustle of leaves in a courtyard, the almost inaudible sigh of a million souls surrendering to sleep. And as you lie on the cusp of your own surrender, your thoughts, now slow and viscous like cooling honey, drift to the most immense and unknowable question of all the legacy of this place. This grand endeavor, these streets and structures laid so carefully in the very loam of the earth, what will remain? You wonder, when the currents of time have washed over this present moment, when generations have come and gone like the annual floods of the great river, the sturdy baked bricks, for certain, their composition a testament to durability, those meticulously planned streets, aligned with such care to the cardinal directions, will their ghostly outlines persist beneath whatever comes after the intricate drains? That silent symphony of sanitation, will they become curious tunnels for small creatures of a future age? You just hope that when some far distant diggers, sifting through the patient dust of millennia, unearth your city's complex sanitation system, they don't jump to the conclusion that it was all just an overly elaborate and remarkably well-graded network for brewing truly undrinkable barley beer, though you muse with a sleepy, internal chuckle, knowing how some citizens still insist on treating the drains as all-purpose refuse chutes. It might be an entirely understandable mistake on their part. You think of the Citadel, its imposing bulk, a statement of, well, a statement of something significant. You're sure. Will those who come after gaze upon its eroding mounds and understand the power it projected, the functions it housed? Or will it simply be another inexplicable lump in the landscape, its purpose lost to the ages? The reality, as you know from tales of even older, forgotten settlements your own people have sometimes stumbled upon, is that the grandest cities of any civilization are eventually abandoned, their magnificent ruins slowly surrendering to the encroaching earth, their stories fading into myth until, perhaps, they are rediscovered by a people who can no longer read their original intent. It's a sobering thought that all this effort, all this order, all this striving might one day be a puzzle for others to solve, their interpretations perhaps wildly, comically off the mark. You idly picture some keen-eyed scholar of a future eon, carefully brushing dirt from a perfectly ordinary, sturdy terracotta storage jar, perhaps one you yourself approve for the granary. With great solemnity, they might declare it a ritual vessel of unknown significance, possibly used for containing the distilled tears of a sky god during periods of prolonged drought. The thought brings a faint, weary smile to your lips. Or worse, your biggest personal fear for posterity, that they'll somehow unearth that hidden cache where you keep your slightly misshapen experimental bricks. The ones that didn't quite meet the 1-to-4 ratio, the ones you couldn't bear to crush, and confidently declare them the dominant architectural style of a clearly degenerate and artistically confused period. The indignity would be almost too much for your planner's soul to bear. Even across the gulf of ages, why civilizations fade, why great cities are eventually left to the wind and the weeds, is a question too vast for your tired mind tonight. Historians and philosophers of a distant future, much like your own, will likely argue about the precise combination of factors that lead to the decline and eventual abandonment of once thriving urban centers. Perhaps it will be a change in the climate, the capricious shifting of river courses, some unforeseen internal strife, or the slow disruption of those vital trade routes you work so hard to maintain. For now, all you know is the weight of your own efforts, the feeling of the reed mat beneath you, and the profound silence of the sleeping city around you. You've laid your lines true, managed the water, overseen the production of countless bricks, and tried to create spaces where life, in all its messy, vibrant complexity, can flourish with a measure of order and grace. If someone thousands of years from now manages to decipher your daily work log tablets, they'll probably conclude you were a pedant, obsessed with perfectly straight lines, surprisingly clean water, and the alarmingly unpredictable migratory patterns of particularly stubborn oxen, and you reflect with a final sleepy sigh of contentment. They wouldn't be entirely wrong. The legacy, then, is not just in the physical remnants, the walls and wells that will crumble and silt over. It's in the very act of creation, in the imposition of a humane order against the constant threat of chaos, in the striving for something beyond mere survival. It's in the knowledge passed down, the skills honed, the communities fostered. It is a story written not just in clay and brick, but in the lives shaped within these walls. And as the last tendrils of wakefulness release their hold, you drift into the deep, dreamless peace of exhaustion, your own small chapter in the city's immense story now complete, leaving its enduring mark, however humble, laid in the patient loam. The world around you, the one you've so meticulously shaped and endlessly pondered, begins to soften now, its sharp edges blurring as you sink deeper into the welcoming embrace of genuine, untroubled sleep. The weight of the granaries, the anxieties of the trade routes, the silent demands of the street grid. All of these concerns finally, truly, begin to lift from your shoulders, light as dust motes dancing in a moonbeam that you no longer see. Imagine the vast, quiet expanse of the night sky above your sleeping city. The stars like scattered jewels, indifferent to the triumphs and tribulations of the fleeting lives below, yet not indifferent, perhaps, to the enduring human spirit that dares to build, to organize, to dream of order and community amidst the vastness of time and the caprice of nature. Your breath deepens, evens out, a soft, rhythmic tide mirroring the distant, gentle murmur of the great river, which now seems less a threat and more a timeless lullaby. The city sleeps, secure for another night, its myriad souls resting, replenishing, ready for the dawn that will inevitably come. And you, its planner, its caretaker, its worrier-in-chief, are now just one among them. A weary mind finally granted its well-earned quiescence. Let the concerns of tomorrow wait for tomorrow's light. For now, there's only the profound peace of the present moment, the darkness a comforting blanket, the silence a soothing balm. Rest now. Rest deep. The legacy laid in loam will keep its secrets, and your part in its unfolding is, for this night at least, beautifully, perfectly done.